This is Top Accolade Global News Update. I am Abiodun Mohammed. Peru inaugurated a new president on Wednesday after a day of political drama that saw leftist leader Pedro Castillo arrested after his ousting from office in an impeachment trial following his last-ditch bid to cling to power by dissolving Congress. Ignoring Castillo's attempt to shut down the legislature by decree, lawmakers moved ahead with a previously planned impeachment trial with 101 votes in favor of removing him, 6 against and 10 abstentions. The result was announced to loud cheers, and the legislature called on Vice President Dina Boluarte to take office. The 60-year-old Boluarte was sworn in as president through 2026, making her the first woman to lead Peru. She called for a political truce after months of instability, including 2 prior impeachment attempts, and said a new cabinet inclusive of all political stripes would be formed. She lambasted Castillo's move to dissolve Congress as an attempted coup. The public ministry said on Wednesday evening that Castillo had been detained and accused of the crimes of rebellion and conspiracy for breaking the constitutional order. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Wednesday that his army could be fighting in Ukraine for a long time, but he saw no sense in mobilizing additional soldiers at this point. As for the duration of the special military operation, well, of course, this can be a long process, Putin said, using his preferred term for Russia's invasion, which started in February. In a televised meeting of his Human Rights Council that was dominated by the war, Putin said Russians would, in quote, defend ourselves with all the means at our disposal, asserting that Russia was seen in the West as, in quote, a second-class country that has no right to exist at all. He said the risk of nuclear war was growing, the latest in a series of such warnings, but that Russia saw its arsenal as a means to retaliate, not to strike first. He said there was no reason for a second mobilization at this point, after a call-up of at least 300,000 reservists in September and October. Putin said 150,000 of these were deployed in Ukraine, 77,000 in combat units, and the others in defensive functions. The remaining 150,000 were still at training centers. Iran has announced what is the first publicly known execution of a person convicted for an alleged crime stemming from the country's ongoing protest. The man executed was identified on Thursday by the official news website of the Iranian judiciary as Mohsen Shekhari. He was convicted of, in quote, waging war against God for allegedly attacking a security officer with a knife and closing off a street in Tehran, demonstrating the speed with which Iranian authorities have vowed to prosecute cases linked with riots, as they often describe incidents related to the protest. The judiciary said there was just over a month between the man's first court session and his execution. The 23-year-old Shekhari was arrested on September 25th, just over a week after protests erupted across Iran, following the death in custody of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who had been detained by the country's morality police for allegedly not adhering to Iran's mandatory dress code for women. Shekhari received his preliminary death sentence on November 20th, and it was carried out on Thursday morning, shortly after being upheld by the country's Supreme Court. Indonesia has released on parole Umar Patek, convicted for his role in the Bali bombings that killed more than 200 people in 2002 after he completed just more than half of his sentence. Patek, a member of the Qaeda-linked Jemaah Islamiyah, JI, was jailed for 20 years in 2012 after he was found guilty of mixing the bombs used in the attack on 2 busy nightclubs in the resort town of Kuta. Following his release, Patek will be required to join a mentoring program until April 2030, according to a statement from the Ministry of Law and Human Rights on Wednesday that announced his release. His parole will be revoked if he violates any of its terms during that time. The ministry added, the Bali attacks were the worst in Indonesian history and led to a crackdown on hardline groups such as JI. Australia and the United States also provided funding and assistance to strengthen Jakarta's counter-terrorism operations. Indonesia announced in August that Patek had become eligible for parole after some reductions to his sentence in a decision criticized by Australia, home to 88 of the Bali attacks. That is the size of Top Accolade Global News Updates. You can follow us on our social media platforms as displayed on your screen. Happy Thursday!